a little brief introduction, and then I'll start to talk about, I chose about 6 or 7 chapters I thought here that were good for guys working with younger players. Hey, it's really good for guys coaching the older players too, but I'm going to present it for guys coaching a little bit the youth levels. First of all, it's really good to have a chance to talk to some coaches about the game of hockey. I've written a couple of books. This is the second one. The first book I wrote was the King of Russia, that was on my experiences coaching in the KHL. This book is called Loose Pucks and Ice Bags. The reason for the title is about 10, 12, 15 years after I started coaching, I realized the essence of the game was to get to the puck first, which I was told as a youngster, and I started to realize that's really important. And the second one was ice bags. And it really, ice bag simply means that your team competed, and you have to compete if you want to be successful in ice hockey. So that's why the name of the book. The philosophy of the book, Loose Pucks and Ice Bags, is I'm a real believer if you can improve understanding, you improve execution. And so when I've coached all the way along, my teaching background always takes me that direction, where I try to make sure that the people I'm working with, regardless of their age, understand why we're doing something, because I think if I can do that and it resonates with them, we're going to get improved execution. And that's with players, but I think the same thing applies to coaches. I think if you can improve the understanding for a coach, you get better execution as a coach. And I don't think a book like this makes a coach turn and become complicated. I think it's the other way around. I think the more you understand anything, the more you can simplistically teach it. I've heard doctors that are heart surgeons describe operations, and they do it so simply that's amazing. So they have a vast amount of knowledge, but they can put it in layman's terms that we can all understand. So I kind of took the book that direction, trying to make sure that I'm looking at understanding. Yes, the last third of the book talks about technical, tactical things. The first 2/3 of the book is quite topical. It's a little different. I talk about all kinds of things that I'm going to give you a bit of exposure to that here today. The next thing I want to say is there's a challenge in coaching that we all know exists. If your practices don't challenge them, it doesn't develop them. So that's kind of the first thing you have to always think about as a coach. But the second thing is, how can you make them better without taking the fun out of it? And so that's really the challenge in coaching, is those 2 points. And so it's not easy to be a coach, whether you're a volunteer youth coach or a professional coach, college coach, whatever it might be. It's certainly not easy. And those are 2 things that have to be in balance. You've got to challenge them, but you can't challenge them so much you take the fun out of it, and they don't get a sense that they're improving. I think with all kids, fun is really important to staying with the game. And then some understanding that, yeah, I'm getting better here. That really, really, I think, keeps kids staying with the game. And at some point, you hope it all connects into, gee, I love this game. I want to keep playing this game. Whether that's, it leads anywhere in the game itself, as long as they keep playing as adults and enjoy it, that's terrific. The first chapter in the book, I've titled "The Times They Are A-Changin'," because without a doubt, every era things start to change. And we've seen a dramatic change in our clientele, if you like, or our players over the last 15 or 20 years. I mean, our children now have cell phones, they have computers, they learn formally in school, but they learn informally with their phones and computers, sometimes not the right things, but they do learn. So if they want to find answers, they can find answers, and they are able to use these implements to do that. So I think they're more in line now with the informal learning than they are the formal learning. I think kids now, we have to approach them a little bit differently to get the message across. And I think if you don't understand that, you've really got an issue with how kids learn now, because they learn differently than they did when we were kids a long time ago. Because of all our clientele changing, I think one of the things that I talk about in this chapter is self-management skills. To me, it's really hard to do the job if you can't feel like you're under control. And one of the things in the coaching certification programs that I think is still short on is self-management skills. Because if we can learn those strategies, we can deal with parents better, players better, referees, and you create a better environment. And when you create a better environment, that's when kids have the most amount of fun, and so do you as a coach. So I think that's really, really important for me in the first chapter, is to talk about the self-management skills, because that all translates into balance. And when the only time coaches have difficulty is when they get out of balance a little bit. Because so many times at coaching conferences, or I'll get emails from coaches and they're asking for drills on techniques and tactics and things like that. And hey, I appreciate that. They want that. But I still think one of the keys to providing development for players at any level, and I've learned that for sure at the pro level, environment. If you can create a good environment, an honest environment, a respectful environment, I think you get a lot more done. And we're seeing now, children's lives are more complicated than they were in our era. Kids now have a lot of complications day to day. They have a lot of things they have to figure out because the family unit's changed. It's not as stable as it once was. School is in many ways more challenging for them. Social relationships are more challenging for them. So if they aren't having fun at our sport, they're not going to stick with it. So that first chapter just talks about strategies coaches can use. It refers a lot to professional hockey, but when you read it, you realize, hey, that's very applicable to working with kids. So I made it the first chapter because I still think that's the essence of what we have to do in working with youngsters. The next chapter I want to talk about is one that comes up a lot. Can we teach hockey sense? And there's a belief that hockey sense is innate. And I think there's some credence to that a little bit. But I've been a teacher for a long time. And I know one thing from my teaching background, you can take a student who's a very poor math student, and with them intentionally trying to learn, and you being patient as a teacher, trying to help them, show them some ways, ask them some questions, they get better at math. So I think, why not the same thing with hockey? Why can't kids improve their game sense? I don't think it means that they all become super intelligent players, but they become smarter players. They do become smarter players. And one of the keys to that for me is the point of view that I think when kids play hockey, it's important that they play with a positive, optimistic mindset. We raise our kids with lots of can'ts and don'ts around the house. They have to learn things. So you can't do this, don't do that, da-da-da-da. But when they get to the rink, I want them to be optimistic. I want them to come in and try some things, be experimental. Without a doubt, I think our sport is not an easy sport to play. It's a very difficult sport. If you look at all the sports we have to learn to skate before we can even play this game. Most games you can run, and most children can run. You've got a stick to handle the implement, not just your hands or your feet. So you got a stick in between that's challenging. You've got a very slippery ice surface that's not easy to play on. You got 10 players that all want the puck. So the game is really not easy to be played. So I think with game sense, here's 6 things I think you can do to improve game sense with a young player. Here's the first one. If you look at the game, there are common reoccurring situations in a game. And those are things you want to be good at. If you want to have players play well, they get good at things that happen a lot in a game. So that's very important. And along with these common recurring game situations, in time, a lot of coaches have developed what they call automatic plays, where you're caught in a situation that you see a lot and it occurs to you a lot in a game, and you know you've got an automatic play. So let's just say a youngster's in the offensive zone. He's working to attack the net. He's in the corner. He hasn't got a good play. He's facing the glass. He's thinking, gee, what do I do? Rather than just blind pass out front, we've taught the automatic play, bump it to the back of the net. And somebody else recognizes he's under pressure, moves to the back of the net, and that automatic play connects. A second method I think is good to improve game sense with young players is play all positions. I mean, they should even play a little bit of goal, I guess, when they're really young, but they should play all positions because it gives them a chance to view the game from a different vantage point. So I always encourage coaches to allow them to play more than one position, because sometimes they indicate to you the way they play that, hey, maybe that's where they should play, rather than you just deciding he should be a forward, or he's decided he's to be a forward. Maybe he's a better D-man. So playing all positions, I think, develops more game sense. The third thing I think it's important with developing game sense is, to develop game sense, you need decisions. So I like small area hockey, because I think in a smaller area, the kids do have to make more decisions with the puck. And I think as long as they have enough opportunity to be successful, the area shouldn't be so small that they can't handle a puck. They can't have a little working space that is time to make a play, but reduced ice space a little bit, reduced numbers a little bit. And I think what you get then is lots of decisions, which I think is helpful for a young player. The fourth thing I think is important with youngsters to develop game sense is you're teaching methods. And I know Wally kind of believes in a lot of this stuff, and I think that's very important. That's where the game has changed a little bit. I think as a coach, you have to do some telling. You do. You have to tell the player some things. You have to give them some information. You have to ask some questions at appropriate times, because they can give you feedback. And through the questions, sometimes they answer their own question. And I think you have to have very little yelling and shouting. I think you can do it in a proper manner with kids, just like you would in a classroom. In a classroom, there's rarely anybody shouting or yelling. It's communication. It's civil, respectful communication. And when that's done, I think youngsters relax, and I think they start to get some confidence. And when they get confidence, I think that's when they can start to show you some game sense. Can you make every drill a little more interesting for kids? We have to have repetitive skill development drills. They're important. But for some of those drills, can you add a read situation? And probably the best person to do that is the coach, where the coach can make a movement. The player has to react to it, maybe go the other direction, change the puck from one side to the other side, things like that. I just think sometimes coach pressure to some of our simplistic drills adds to the drill, because it adds a little read. It makes it more interesting. It makes it slightly more challenging. Again, don't disrupt success. The next point I think is really important for me is avoid labeling kids early. And at any point in hockey, I've learned over the years, it's easy to label somebody. The guy's not a smart player. The guy's not a tough player. That youngster isn't dedicated, because labels are often wrong. Game sense is really interesting. A lot of times it's just one thing. It's not game sense. It's lack of confidence. That's the issue. The youngster gets the puck and doesn't really want the puck. They don't believe they can make a good play, and so they get rid of it. So you think right away, oh, he or she hasn't got good game sense, and that's not the case. So avoid labeling, because sometimes there's almost a indication that the labels can't change. And I've gone through experiences where I've had players play for me, and I thought, I watch him scrimmage, and we're evaluating, and I see the guy making mistakes. The play always ends with him, and I think, gee, that player hasn't got game sense. But he goes to some other team, and suddenly he plays pretty well, and he shows you more game sense. And it's confidence. So confidence is a big factor when you're looking at game sense. Don't confuse game sense with lack of confidence, because that's often done, and labels can sometimes be They are hard to get off once they're placed on a player. Okay, the next chapter I want to talk about is called Talk the Extra Man. When I was a young guy in Saskatoon, I remember playing with a player on our team, and he always had the puck. And I thought, gee, this guy's not our best skater. He's not our best player. Why does he always got the puck? And then I realized he talked more than anybody else. So if you talk more, you have the puck more. And I think it's good to start it young. I know when I coached in Russia in the KHL, nobody talks. Players don't talk. And I asked them why. I said, well, no one ever told us to talk. It's not something they don't stress with us. And I think talk is the extra man. Talk is a great way to feel more comfortable on the ice. I think it's sometimes it's great to see the play, but sometimes you have to protect the puck. So your eyes go down on the puck. So now I can't see it, but I could hear it. So sometimes that ability to hear a play rather than see a play can make a real difference. And this is a difficult game to play. So when you have somebody talking to you, it simplifies the game. It tends to, it gives you the impression that the game slows down. And that's because people are talking to you. You don't feel rushed. You don't feel hurried. You're played with more confidence. So to me, a team that talks, the confidence of their team goes up, and that's so important. I think with more talk, it's more team possession. So we really stress that. The other aspect I like for kids is when you talk, you add a safety factor to a game. If there's a youngster going into the corner and there's somebody right on him and you just say, man on, that helps that player protect himself. He's aware. He's not caught surprised by a hit, surprised by a defender there. He's prepared for it. So I really think that's something with kids we have to look at, is the idea that when you talk, you simplify the game. And when you play your small area games, the more you talk, it's amazing how much there's better decisions made. So your game sense goes up when you talk a little bit. So I think that's a very important chapter in this book. And I'll have to define this for you because it's just terminology that I like. First of all, decisions come from the head. Okay? Choices come from the heart, if you like. That's about as simplistically as I can say it. So the game is constantly changing. When you're on the ice, the circumstances you're playing it in constantly are changing. It's momentary. There's a play is there, boing, it's gone. Something else has to happen. So it's a difficult game to play. And there's lots and lots of decisions to be made. And an example of decisions. Say you're carrying the puck up the wide lane of the ice, and you've got a player pursuing you from behind, and you've got a player up in front, and he's playing pretty tight gap on you. You haven't got a very good play. Well, a good play is to simply put it off the boards indirect for somebody else to skate on to it, or for you to skate onto. But to me, that's a really smart decision. It's kind of almost an automatic play that exists that sometimes is the solution to a tough circumstance on the ice. Let's look at choices. To me, choices, let's just say it's back checking. I can be on the ice, okay? And I'm back checking. Now, if I give a reasonable effort, all the guys on the bench, the coach probably are going to think, hey, that's okay. That's great. But I know I could have done better. Now, if I give an exceptional effort on my back check and I catch that player with the puck from behind and disengage him from the puck, it doesn't matter if anybody else recognized it. You did. You know you did your best. You know you couldn't do any more. That's a hard choice. The easy choice is I'll just give it a decent effort. No one will know and it'll be okay. Or I can give it the hard effort, the tough effort, and really go after that guy with all my speed I can generate. I may be tired, but I'm going to dig in and try to go. That makes a difference. And you know what's interesting? Because when you get into the game, you find to win, it's a real paradox. And here's the paradox. To win in hockey, I think, you have to make more easy decisions, okay, and more hard choices if you want to win. And that's really interesting that that's the way it is with decisions and choices. If your team makes the hard choices, taking a hit to make a play, blocking a shot, whatever, back checking a little harder than they believe they could, that makes a difference. Making smart decisions, easy decisions, really helps your game and really helps your success. So that's the paradox. Easy decisions and hard choices, that's how you're successful in the game. And as you go up in the game, you find out that hockey sense and effort and determination really are critical to your success. And the thing I like about that is you're learning a life lesson in terms of, if I compete, I put a good effort in, we get something out of it. And I think all youngsters have to learn that life lesson. So as we go up in the game, more and more smart decisions and challenging, difficult plays or choices, sometimes that's the way it is. That's the way it has to be. This is a chapter I put in the book because right now, one of the big operative words in the game is play fast, play fast. And I agree. Ideally, we want everybody to play fast, because the faster you can play, whether it's offense or defense, the more successful you are going to be. But there's a point of readiness with young players. If you start trying to get them to play real fast when they're young, it's just going to be an endless number of mistakes being made. There is a point of readiness. Every player has an optimal pace to their game. A lot of it's based on confidence and skill. And I think you got to be careful. You got to be patient. You got to be repeating things with the youngsters in terms of their drills and things that they do. And you got to make sure you give them time to get to that point where they can actually execute and play the game a little bit faster. Because it's really hard. This is a hard game to play. And for children, trying to get them to play fast too early, it will hurt their confidence. And that's when they likely will leave the game. If you're patient and take your time on that one, I think it's better done that way. So easier said than done is just a message in this book to coaches. Yes, you want your players to play fast. There's lots of things you want in the game, but there's points of readiness. And that means as soon as the players got capable skill with the puck, they can play the game more with their eyes up. Their skating skills are good. They've learned to play with others and cooperate and connect with others. I think you can start talking about playing fast. But until that point of readiness is reached, you're wasting your time talking about playing fast. And so that's one I just want coaches to be careful of, because you can really get a guy making so many mistakes because he's trying to play fast to please you, and he can't play that way. So when you do small area drills or small area scrimmages, make sure your numbers and your space are right. So you always, I said it before, they achieve success. When they achieve success, they get confidence. With confidence will come tempo, will come pace. They're all tied and interconnected. They're not separate. I put this chapter in the book because we've always compared in North America ourselves to the Russians. That's the epitome of European hockey, has always been Russia. And I was lucky to coach our national team for a long time and play against the Russians 25 or 30 times in a season with our national team. And then I coached in Russia for 2 years. So I've had a chance to see what they do. And it's very interesting for me because this is almost historical. I can remember back in the 70s and in the 80s, Russian players played in a certain way, and Canadian players played in a certain way. And a lot of it comes from how they were coached and the size of the ice surface. All those issues, we were on divergent paths in terms of coaching. In North America, our players developed in a certain way with playing more straight lines, get it to the net, more physical. As coaches, our emphasis was on winning more than development. So the intensity was always a big part of our game in North America. In Russia, winning is not as important as developing. The size of the ice surface makes guys want to pass the puck more because if you pass the puck, the game, you play faster. You can't skate as fast as you can pass the puck. So a pass is way faster than a skater. So the Russian game or the European game, their players develop differently. Our players look differently. It's because the systems of development were different. But what's happened over the last 25 or 30 years is we have the game starting to converge now. Their young players at a young age look a lot like our players because we're doing the same similar types of things. Russia's gone now, and most European countries are being asked by the IIHF to go to a smaller ice surface, like it is the North American surface. So that's changing things. But a lot of Russian players have gone back to Russia and European players back to their countries, and they're coaching. And they've taken a lot of things from our game to apply to their game. We, first of all, back in the 70s and 80s, took a lot of things from their game and we added them to our game when the European players came to play in our league, when we had the Canada series with Russia in 72, and then all the NHL European challenge matches against Russian club teams. All that stuff brought their information to us and we changed a little bit. But now we're finding that the styles of the games are converging, and we're getting more and more to a point now where there's not major differences between Russian players or European players than North American players when they come to the league. I can remember when players like Makarov, I got him in Calgary. I mean, it was a huge change for him to come in and play our style of game. That was very, very difficult for him because he had played a far different style. Now you get players that can come in, Russian players, and they can very quickly adapt to our style of game because it's very similar to their style. If you watch games in the KHL, they're very similar to NHL games in the tactical style they play.
KHL, do they have small ice?
Yes, the KHL teams now, almost all teams now have taken their ice surfaces down to the North American size, and that's been mandated by the IIHF. All world championships will in future be played on North American size ice surfaces. So in Russia, they're reducing ice surfaces, and that's amazing because in the 70s, 80s, even into the 90s, we always talked in North America, we got to make the ice surface big. So the more we play each other, the more we play the same. And so that chapter, one size fits all, is just a perspective that we are starting to develop players that play the game quite similarly, even though they're in different countries. And it's because the coaching methods, techniques, information is now quite similar. It's interesting, when I was in the KHL, all the club teams have all the Hockey Canada certification manuals in their coaching offices. It's probably 4 or 5 teams in the KHL that their youth systems have a North American coordinator, full-time. Like when I was in Lokomotiv in Yaroslavl, we had a Canadian over there who worked with all the youth hockey programs. He was the coordinator. And so the game's gone, there's exchange of information over the last 30 or 40 years, which is making the product, the player, very similar too. So that chapter was on that, just to give coaches a perspective that we're doing a lot of things now that are very similar to what the European teams are doing. The last chapter I'm going to talk about today in the book is called Apple Pie in the Sky. I don't think so. I put this chapter in the book because I wanted parents and coaches especially to try to keep an open mind into new ideas, new methods of doing things. Yes, the game was played this way for a long time, but why can't we try a different way of doing it? So a lot of Hockey Canada and USA Hockey's information is based upon small ice. We have the checking, body checking has been moved back into the game at a little bit higher level. People at first were so opposed to these things, and there's probably some still are. But I really believe as parents, adults, hockey administrators, and coaches, we have to have an open mind. New ideas offer possibilities. And with possibilities, there's progress possible. So I think we have to look at that, give it a chance. So for example, in this chapter, I talk about, it's very interesting. I talk about coaches having an open mind. And there's a coaching continuum that I'm going to talk a bit about here with you. To me, balance is everything for a coach. If you can keep your perspective in balance, be open to new ideas. Yes, you believe in certain things. Yes, you believe in certain ways of teaching the game. But if you can be balanced and open-mindedness, have some open-mindedness, I think that helps you do the job. So here's a couple of things on a continuum. As a coach, you can be an intimidating coach. Hard, demanding, be really hard to a guy who wants things done a certain way. At the other end of the continuum, there's the motivator, a guy who's less that way. He's more, his way of getting things done is by motivating, not intimidating. Another aspect of coaching, demanding and understanding. You can be demanding where it's got to be your way or it's a highway, or you can be understanding, realizing players play it differently, players think differently. There are different ways to do the same thing. Players have that within the game, and it's positive. You can be instructing, and that's your philosophy of how you teach, or you can be guiding. Here, with instructing, you give more information. With guiding, you ask more questions. It's a balance. So there's a continuum there you have to be aware of. And the fourth continuum, I think, is you can be a guy who's, and this is maybe at the higher levels, you can be a guy who stresses conformity. You want everybody to play the same way. You want things done the same way. You want all the players to play exactly the same way. Or you can be a guy who's more based upon your coaching on creativity. You think a player's got certain skill sets, he should be able to do certain things. He should be able to try different things. So you're more of a creative guy that wants players to express themselves based upon their skill level and their game sense. So that's a conformity to creativity continuum. So there's really 3 or 4 continuums for a coach. But there's also continuums for parents to keep the game in balance. And I think that's really almost more important than it is for the coach to have this balance, is the parents. If a parent's hockey relationship with their youngster, there's a continuum in several aspects. Here's a couple. Constant scrutiny. You continually watch your kid and you scrutinize how he plays. Okay, a lot of people approach watching their children that way. At the other end, there's people that observe the game, parents, and enjoy it. That's their end. They're at the other end of the continuum. Can you be somewhere in the middle there? Or I prefer maybe towards the enjoying and observing versus constant scrutiny, but that exists. There's pressure feedback. That's one end of the continuum. The other end is supportive, encouraging feedback. As a parent, you got to realize you can't be putting pressure on the kids all the time. Supportive, encouraging feedback is a good thing. Hey, maybe at times you have to put a little bit of the, hey, nothing wrong with children dealing sometimes with a little bit of adversity, as long as it's the right amount of adversity, but followed up by supportive, encouraging feedback. That's so important. So that balance has to be there. There's technical, tactical skill development that parents look at, but you also have to realize at the other end of the spectrum, there's socializing, psychological skill development going on, and that's so important. And you can't lose sight of that. When kids play with kids and enjoy sport, it's great for them. They're developing all kinds of social skills that will be there long after hockey is over. And then you have the other continuum, which is over expectation. At the other end of the spectrum, you have having fun, and enjoyment. So many parents have high expectations for their kids. It would appear they want it more than their kids do. Their kids are not at a point of readiness to even think about the game that seriously. They just want to have fun. And then there's parents that are at the other end of the spectrum just want their kids to have fun, enjoy it, and that's great. I'm saying there's got to be some balance in that spectrum somewhere in that continuum. So that chapter, apple pie in the sky, I don't think so. is just to try to get people to keep the game in perspective, to keep some balance to your view of the game, to keep some balance to the view of your child in the game. For the coach too, to achieve some balance in those aspects of coaching. We can't be intimidating. Occasionally it happens. Sometimes you raise your voice a little bit, but you got to have things in balance so that the kids get a really good experience. So that chapter, I think, has real applicability to parents as much as it does to coaches. And I wanted to put it in the book because I just felt that, again, it all comes down to creating a positive environment. When you do that, I think things go in a real good direction. So I just wanted to today look at those chapters with you in the book. They're topical, and I think they do help a person maybe understand the game better, but also understand the other options in the game, other ways of viewing my role in the game as a parent or as a coach or as a player. So that's some chapters in the book I think that are applicable to youth coaches